Today on the Power of Sport podcast, we're joined by Joe Lyons, CEO of the West Ham United Foundation. Since 2013, Joe has helped grow the foundation into one of the most impactful club foundations in the country, delivering programs across health, education, employability and community development, from pioneering spaces like the Foundry to supporting thousands of people across East London. Their work shows just how powerful football can be as a force for good. Joe, welcome to the Power of Sport podcast.
Listen, thanks for having. What an opener line that was. Thanks for having me. It's
no worries. Thank you, Joe. What first drew you into the sport for good world, and what keeps you motivated kind of a decade or so later?
So, I think if you ask most people in sport for development, in terms of when they're finally there and you're having a podcast with somebody, it's never that complicated. It's complicated in that it's never that easy to work out your route, because people come from it's normally to do with a passion. It's normally to do with something that you've been interested in over the many years. For me personally, sport for development only kind of became real when I was working at a different club, and their foundation started to grow, and I was doing a bit of a dual role, coaching role as well as kind of a school's role. And I think over the last 30 years, and when I was there kind of over 20 years ago, it wasn't really understood what that means for a football club's charity, the CCO as we now call it, but for the football club's charity, the kind of impact it can have. So kind of we stumbled across a lot of this stuff, which was, beautiful in one sense. But if you were really asking me why I chose to do this versus why I didn't continue to do coaching or continue to do kind of elite work, I'd probably boil it down to just experiences that I had growing up, in terms of some crossroad moments for me personally, where I grew up in the school I was in, and some of the groups in that school. But mirror to that, the experiences I was learning from my parents, who were doing a lot of charity work within specific areas around homelessness and mental health. So I think if you layer all of that together and you make the right choices because of reasons, that kind of becomes your own building blocks, right? So it's your own, your own foundations as to then why you make these decisions. Why did I choose to go not into elite sport versus community sport? Who knows on that exact? Who knows on that moment? But I think it was the right decision, if I'm honest.
Good stuff. And I mean, since 2013, you must have seen like some amazing changes in football foundations. I mean, they seem to have grown a lot. But what are the main changes that you've seen, that you're seeing?
So look, over 30 years, where this all began was because of a responsibility by the PFA and the league in that time to look after ex-players, right? So that was, 30 odd years ago, but that's actually not a long time for a sector who've been grown, right? So when I try and explain this to partners, because when they're saying, why does a football club do this and where did it come from? You can easily put it into 3 decades, right? So the first decade was around understanding what ex-players and then wider can do, so linked to a football club. Kind of in and around some of those moments, there were big decisions by government around things like the Pac-10 and positive futures. So that kind of hooked in a football club in terms of what it was called back then, the social inclusion, go and work in areas where there are situations going on with, youth violence, or, it's the same now as it was back then. But then that started to grow internally within a football club. Lots of charities were then formed as the Premier League progressed. When I kind of came in, it was looking at exploring, could you partner with a university? Well, yeah, of course you could. Could you start doing numeracy and literacy work in schools? Well, yeah, and so you just started to build this out. Could you do health promotion works with the local NHS trust? So, and then you find out actually as a sector, and there's 92 of us, right? Hence, hence the scale of this all, and that's probably how it's grown so quickly, is that you learn from other clubs. You find out, oh, they're doing this over in, a different part of London or up in a different part of the country. So you then say, well, what, we can do that. So you grow naturally. And for me, the last 10 years has been quite technical. So since I went to West Ham in 2013, procurement is a key way in which we obtain some of our work. So actually, to be procured by a local, NHS trust or equivalent, these people aren't going to hand over funds if you're not absolutely on it, if you're not watertight, if you haven't got all of your policy, everything about you as a charity needs to be appropriate for you to then, in theory, take taxpayers' funds and turn it into social outcomes, right? So those kind of 3 decades, and it's just been booming. And it's not just at the West Ham Foundation. As I said, there's a number of other clubs up and down the country that have amazing things going on for their local community. They are anchored. They're the right people to do it locally. And I suppose the tip, if I was going to, what's the next 10 years look like? It's about the data. So we're now able to prove some really cool stuff. We're now able to evidence the impact we're having from a social perspective.
Do you outsource that, Joe? Do you? I mean, that must take a lot of calculating, right? I look at all the impact reports, and I'm just blown away at the levels, but also how much detail there is. Do you outsource all that stuff?
No. So as part of some of the contracts, like for example with the Premier League Foundation, there's a requirement around using certain systems, and I think then you just build on that. So if that system you're working to create an impact report doesn't quite give you what you want, yes, you'd go out to a provider and say, I want to do a bit of number crunching on a certain program, or we use Future Proof. That's been with us for over a decade now, and they're incredible. That's their thing, right? So that's if we have an issue around social return on investment, or if people invest X, what does it actually mean from a social? And then you can categorize it, and you put it into working with the homeless community versus working with people who are coming or in and out of the mental health sector. So you can really then put this into boxes. There's got to be an easier way, probably, in terms of how this is all done. But in the absence of a one-stop shop, amazing data point that everyone could access, we're like everyone else. We're hustling and we're trying to create these amazing stories which have numbers in one hand and kind of testimonials on the other. So
and in terms of that impact at West Ham United Foundation, so can you give us some kind of some big numbers, some highlights of your last impact report, for example? Just tell us what sort of scale we're looking at here.
So I'd probably you've got to question your actual data, to be honest, and I think that's led us to some really interesting stats. So we've, as you've said, we've just created and designed and fundraised for a new community hub in East London called the Foundry. And it was really important as we did that to understand what that impact could be. So the first impact report we did, gave us some whopping numbers, 75 million pounds worth of social impact over the first 5 years. And they're lovely. So when we're cutting the ribbon, and we've got the great and the good, and all of the club were there, and Karen cutting the ribbon versus Nuno was all right. They're big stats, and we were proud of them. But then actually, if you're asking someone to give you £1 or £20,000 to become a business ambassador, or they're saying, well, what do I get? What is the impact? So you have to boil it down from 75 million down to £1. And we've actually just done a piece of work focused on a certain area of the business, which was around getting private sector businesses or companies to put small amounts of funds in, which is going to help our young people grow as young entrepreneurs or become employed in the city, which is a stone's throw from us. And those numbers are quite interesting. So when you talk about £20,000, that's going to give £273,000 worth of social impact when you're looking at employment for a young person who's not in employment, education or training, so who's neat.
And people will back that. Though 13 to 1, 14 to 1, people will be really excited by that. Right?
No, absolutely. And then you throw another scenario and you say, well, what if they've been, struggling with homelessness? So they're already neat and they're now potentially out. So again, you go back through the data and look at some of the Treasury reports, and that's why we're not, using an external a partner, Futureproof, to help us do that has been incredibly valuable, because that's their expertise. And then you can put another £13,000 on that. And then you can say, oh, actually, there's another £3,000 if someone's got food insecurity as well. So you just kind of, you layer this and you say, so I think it's really important for us not only to take our data seriously, like we're custodials of funds for our beneficiaries. So we need to be really sharp on that.
Yeah.
But I think it's also important to be able to tell a story to someone who's making a decision in one of the big corporates, or, if they're donating X, that's of huge value. And here is that value. Here's the social impact value that we can give you, that you can be proud of. And I think when we, over the next decade, when we really start to play this out, I think when you look at NHS departments, for example, who are focused on prevention, and how are they spending X amount of £1 billion on primary care versus to try and eke out some prevention budget, which is desperately difficult because of the current climate. We're only going to be more successful if we can prove to the pound the impact our prevention will have on the NHS total spend, or the police and crime total spend, or the mental health trusts. We need to be, and we're getting there, to be honest. This has been a really good couple of years working with colleagues around the country and at the Premier League Foundation and Premier League as well. So it's been, we're all striving to have better data, and we're not far off it, to be honest.
No, that's really, really logical. And is it always just looking at the foundation data, or do you sometimes work collectively with the football club that impact?
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll find a number of football clubs and their foundations have done some, good pieces of work around what's been the social impact of a stadium move.
Yeah.
And West Ham and they had an EY report over the last couple of years to prove the regen value around tourism, around the economic impact that a club can have in its local area, and that's going to obviously be different for West Ham in Stratford on the Olympic Park versus up in another part of the country with a smaller city or a smaller town. But I think what is undeniable is around the impact of a football club, and we are part of that club, albeit as a charity and a separate charity, but we are part of that family, and the impact it can have is just incredible.
One of the things before I went on the long walk, and we did a piece of research around awareness, and the awareness was pretty low of what it was amongst football fans, and it was pretty low of what is being done, which just seemed like a real shame. And I did go into, not many, but I did go into one or two clubs where they got their impact figure right, hits you between the eyes, and I just thought, I kind of wondered why more clubs didn't do that and kind of remind everyone through those doors 7 days a week why, to what level the club and the foundation are helping. Have you got a view on that, Joe?
Yeah, so across the English Football League and now the Premier League clubs, everyone will have an impact report. So that's the first time ever. So everyone's got a foundation impact report.
Yes, that's just this year. That's going to be the first time that all 92 have done it. Right, okay. Yeah.
So but the economics of it are quite simple. If you're a football club and you're being asked to work with EY or PwC to provide your social impact, there's a huge cost for that.
Yes.
These aren't two pieces of work. So clubs, I would imagine, would do it as and when they feel it necessary. Maybe there's some regen, maybe there's some planning requirement, or it makes sense for the argument. Personally, the more people know about us as a part of a football club, so our social media, our communication to the fan base and then to the community, because they're not always the same. The West Ham fans and the East London community in parts are different things. So how we communicate can't just be about an impact report.
No. I just think it was Stevenage that really grabbed me actually straight away. I just remember walking in and it said, we delivered over the last year £8.9 million in social value, and I just thought, bang, that's right in the middle. It's the first thing I've seen, and I just thought, I wish everyone did that.
So they will now get to that position, but again, that top layer, I personally think, if you can also then boil that right down to a pound.
Yes. Yeah. No, it makes loads of sense.
A pound is £13 worth of it. So it's that kind of progression. But look, this more and more you'll see job adverts going up around our sector for data and impact specialists.
Definitely. Yeah.
Look, the more we do as a sector, like, so for example, in London, our London United network, we just did an impact report around youth safety, and we use Substance as the provider to do that, who's a good friend of a lot of football clubs up and down the country. And that was then positioned to the Mayor of London and Lib's team in the VRU. And then we had a collaborative event, which was an amazing opportunity to highlight that collaboration. Now, those numbers are specific to youth safety, to youth work. But imagine then the other sectors, you did an employment report based on London. So you got your clubs in your little patches for sure, and you do amazing work. But then you come together and you pull out these amazing stats. And then you were to say nationally, there's probably 6, 7, 8 obvious regions around the country. If those clubs all came together, regionally, working with their regional mayors or their regional departments of the NHS or wherever that lands, that's then really appropriate. Of course, you have arguably 92 clubs. If you put that data together and then spoke to the government or different departments around the government, they're going to look at you differently. And I think that's the next phase of this. And we're all clear in that. That's the next phase, because as any prevention strategies, which everyone will always nod and say, of course we need prevention strategies, but you can't work with who wants to work with 92 individual charities? Imagine the layers to that.
No, totally. It's a logical step. I think the Midlands just got together, didn't they? And then saw that.
Really powerful.
So what over your times, and it might be as you say something small, or it might be the big figure, but what kind of makes you most proud of West Ham United Foundation? What have you experienced that's really excited you in terms of its impact and
Listen, there's a lot in the last 12 years, right? So
of course,
we've grown from a very small trust to a good sized charity, in and out, probably near on £5 million a year, 35 projects with a lot of breadth and depth, right? So we go off piste a lot, and I think that's part of. I'm really proud when I talk, and we had an event last night with some new friends that are coming into our space at the Foundry. You can really talk about how broad you are as a charity, and people are just pretty blown away, actually, saying, well, really, you've set up this amazing program in GP surgeries. Really, is that your role to do that? Well, that's fantastic, because you're kind of preventing mental health situations for young people that have been referred in by their GP. Versus,
can you tell us a bit about that, Joe, just before going just quickly on that GP? So a young person comes in and you're working with the GP surgery. What happens? What are you doing with them?
So there's a pretty tragic story with most programs. They all come out of something. So something is what there's been some sort of issue, some sort of social problem that then gets people to think, well, how do we prevent this? And unfortunately, you know, there was a murder in East London, and I won't go into too much detail, but one of the local lead GPs got speaking to us around the situation, and really what happened was, you know, 24 hours after any tragic death, especially for a young person, right? All of the statutory people are sitting around the table, you know, not on Teams. You know, they're talking about why this happened. And then actually the GP, an amazing GP called Fazana Hussain, reached out and said, look, let's meet, hearing some good stuff around what you do, because I want to prevent that ever happening again. So how could we collaborate? We then had an event in the Old Bailey with some of the judges there that are just incredible about what they're trying to do around prevention and youth violence, and had Fazana and had the leader of the council from Newham, Roxana Fires there, and we all stumbled across this piece of work where, wow, we're all glued together here. So actually, how would we do this prevention wise? If a young person is, you know, a GP is looking at a note and there's a young person who's 12 or 14 who's punched a wall and has gone to hospital, you know, why are they punching a wall? That's not normal behavior. So let's identify that. So now what we have is youth workers, detached youth workers that are trained, that sit within the GP surgery and work with the referral. So the GP says, there's obviously something going on here. I'd really like you to go and speak with a West Ham coach. Now, you know, there you have exactly the example of, you're never going to tell them that they're a trained mental health or detached youth worker. You're going to say it's a West Ham member of staff with their badge, and it's the fairy dust of football that then gets sprinkled behind it. Like with all of our programs, there's very skilled staff who can execute the delivery in the program. But that program then really is trying to stop young people developing issues and potentially then end up in a situation which is uncontrollable and or into a mental health situation, more severe. And we have then programs who can deal with that. So you get what I mean? You build out all of these prevention points, and that's where you get to 35 projects, because it all stems from the power of sport, the power that sport has to engage and to transform people's thoughts and engagement and life chances. And then it will go into all of these different kind of avenues of work. But the PCN program is probably delivered up and down the country, but it hasn't become a national piece. You'd probably call it, if you know, social prescribing, or, you know, it would come under one of those tags. But I want to work closely with all of our PCN wards in Northeast London where we work, and again start to create some really cool data around it. So we're working with Anna Freud, it's the independent research organization, to give us the validation around, does this program actually work? And listen, if it does and the stats are there, then fantastic.
Totally. And I mean, one of the things we're doing, so after the walk I pledged that I was just going to shine a light on the great work that people like you are doing, right? And that's part of what this podcast exists for. And but our next thing, which will go live during March, is a sport impact hub. And it basically is where people like you will put your programs in, so that there's this real emphasis. I know you've got London United. I know there's the Midlands thing. I know that football talks to each other quite well, it seems, from a distance. But which we want to get. We want to get people from different sports, basketball England, speaking to netball, speaking to cricket, speaking to football, learning from each other and accelerating this impact that sport has. And I mean, just you mentioned the power of the badge, it being a West Ham coach. Why? Sorry, this is probably a complicated question, I guess, because but why is football so powerful in that context?
It's going to be different in different territories around the world. I think you know, the US being an obvious example. You know, football or soccer out there isn't the same as baseball or their football. No. It's because it's got over 100 years worth of history, if I'm honest. You know, this is where footballers come from, is out of probably desperate times and people wanting to create moments for themselves on a Saturday afternoon in a church hall or a working men's club, or a shipbuilders in East London, the Thames Ironworks. That's where West Ham came from, and these are deeply entrenched into very local communities, and the tradition. So you've got 5 generations of people that have grown up supporting West Ham, or it becomes a way. It becomes a way of life. And I think if you were to ask, we have a program called Any Old Irons as an example. So these are 65-year-old plus members who have, they would talk about they've gone through probably hard times in later life, and maybe because of losing loved ones and not having a support system or being lonely. That whole West Ham thing brought them back together. So they're the Any Old Ironers get together regularly to tell these stories. Now, if you had spoke to them originally and said, do you know what our foundation is? They'd say, well, I haven't got a clue. No clue. But if you ask them to tell these stories about the chicken run at West Ham, Upton Park, and how they met their loved one on the chicken, these stories are just incredible.
Yeah.
And then you can create the awareness around the foundation. So when I ask Any Old Ironers now, what does the foundation mean to you? And I did last night to one of the members that we had at our event. She's just brutally honest. She's saying it saved my life.
Wow.
Saved my life. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the foundation. And then obviously they're getting to know some of the work we do with young people, or some of the work we do in other areas.
Yes.
But I think you asked a question earlier about the key moment for me. So I could honestly pick hundreds of moments.
Yeah.
Setting up Any Old Irons with David Gold, our late chairman, all those years ago, versus exploring other programs, or really good moments over the last 12 years. But the foundry for us was that consistent bit of work that started in 2016, just grown into what it is now. And it's our hub, it's our anchor in East London, it's our HQ, and everything can now operate out of that. And we're going to work 100 miles territory still in terms of East London and in Essex, and international programs are developing as we speak. But you're always going to come back to the foundry and think, what can that magical building, aspirational community hub do for East London? And that's going to be there long after I leave the club or retire. This is there for good.
It gets mentioned all the time. So I've got to get down and have a look. It sounds incredible. And how do you think government? I mean, it stood out that you were working with GP surgeries. Well, I heard a lot of stories on the walk, obviously, about the impact, but the GP surgery stood out for me. How do you think government could work better? I know you talked about data and you having kind of responsibility to show that impact, but how, from the government side, how could government work better with sport for good over the coming years?
Again, I'd be critical of us first.
Yeah. So
think about a government department. I don't know. We've got some really good contacts in the Department of Education. So Mark Riddell, who oversees care leavers as a national priority. He doesn't want to go and knock on the door on 92 clubs. He's not going to be able to do that, right? So we need to work harder at collaborating and collectively positioning ourselves for government. That's number one. And look, there's big platforms like the Premier League and the English Football League Trust in terms of how they do that. But on a grassroots level, lots of London Uniteds up and down the country would be definitely where I would start. Because I think actually collectively bringing your data together and the impact that we have, and having, for example, 17 hubs around London that can do all of this, and maybe 2 or 3 in each territory. You could easily have 20, 25 hubs working for the government to create these moments, to create these aspirational spaces. But ultimately there is a requirement for government to fund. So once we can prove that we're going to be better than just spending money on the same solution that you think is going to work, for example, and the report that smacked me in the face was the the care leaver review from PwC a few years ago, where 10.2, I think it was 10.2, over 10 billion pounds going into the care system each year.
Yeah.
And you argue that the results aren't as good as you would want from all of the data that sits in judicial system or the Department of Education. So actually, if they're going to continue just to put 10 billion pound into the care system, then what can we do to say, well, maybe, start to prioritize preventative work. So start to look at what we can do for our local care leavers in Newham or Barking and Dagenham or Tower Hamlets and the other clubs who are doing amazing work with their systems. That's where you then you specifically go and speak to the lead for care leavers, or the lead for mental health, or the lead for youth violence, like we're doing. So that takes time, trust. Everyone's got to be confident. The word I put through, the reason why I think as a foundation we were able to do something like the Foundry is a consistency. There was a steady professional consistency that I think's, it would be a deal breaker for me. I think, because if you kept being inconsistent and you didn't have those relationships, even though politics changes on cycles themselves, we're very steady. You said it yourself earlier. A lot of people in our sector have been here a long time, and they don't deviate from the message. They've always been saying the same thing. They know how powerful the work they do is, and I think it's now just knocking up a little bit and just saying to different departments, different policymakers, put your money into prevention, because we can save you money. We can save you funds in the long run, which is only going to increase the output that we can have. And look, I'm not being arrogant either at all, and absolutely not. It's not about us either. It's about us working in collaboration with our local communities. So our My Ends program, and as an example with the VRU and Libs team, is not it's not us. It's our collective, and five organisations coming together, different skills, different strengths, different ways in which they're going to bring their kind of top trump to the consortia. But if I was government, I'd be tasking us to do that more. So use you as a big organisation as an anchor, but go and work with these incredible grassroots that can do better stuff. They can do work that we can't do. Absolutely. But we'd be a solid partner to collaborate with from a government perspective now, after a good few decades of establishing ourselves and proving our value.
No, that evolution is really exciting. Joe, just tell us, I mean, again, you must see so many individual stories and hear about so many from all the people in your growing organization. Can you give us one or two more just individual stories where you've worked as the foundation or in collaboration with others, where you've made just massive differences to individuals?
So if you look at our impact report, it will tell you that we engage over 50,000 people, right? You're not going to have a life-changing moment for those 50,000, but you've still had moments. You've done work in schools with lots of young people, and they've left understanding a little bit more about healthy lifestyles, or so you've had those. If you look at it as a sport continuum, that triangle, 50,000 people at the bottom, and that goes up and up. So then at the top of those is where you're having those life-changing moments. And for me, a life-changing moment, this isn't something that, again, you'd put into one box, because what's life-changing for one person is totally different for another. As I said, we had an event last night where we were bringing to life some of our stories, and we chose 3 different ones, actually. So we chose our Any Old Ironers. We had the beautiful Eileen and Zena, who are with us, who are part of our Any Old Ironers. And unscripted, you're asking them, how do you like the foundation? How do you like Any Old Ironers? What does it mean to you? And they're telling you that it would have it's drastically changed their life in such a positive way, and that they were suicidal, they were deeply lonely, deeply isolated. And now to sit in a room having a nice dinner with our friends and being able to tell that story. And you can then multiply that story for sure. You know, you're going to have lots of those sort of people that have come through you. Versus on the different end of the spectrum, you've got young people that engage again with your, you know, the fishing net goes out wide to engage lots of young footballers.
Yeah.
But then you also engage with people that are, you know, in a bit of trouble. They're in potentially a pupil referral unit, or they're excluded from school, and they're engaged in a kicks program, for example.
Yes.
And it's our amazing mentors, again, coaches disguised. You know, these are youth trained youth workers who are saying to young people, come on our journey, trust us. You know, we're never going to not be here for you. We're never going to let you down. Trust us to be there for you. But this goes two ways. You know, you need to attend school. You need to then make different choices, right? And we had Tayab, who's our one of our ambassadors now, in terms of has come through the program. And he went, and I didn't even know this story. He went on, we did a match of the day piece, and he told the story about, you know, he was from a different part of East London, but knew E6, and then was brought, he kind of snuck out. His mum said, don't leave this postcode, but he went to kick session and started getting engaged, went on our football program, did the college, you know, he went on his journey with us. And he says that, you know, there was three of us as best friends in class. One of them's in prison and one of them's not here anymore. But he made those choices. Why did he make the choices? You're never really going to know that. But we gave him the opportunity to do that. So that's, you know, Tayab's story is just incredible. And the other one was around, look, but personally, again, I think if you can say yes, regardless of your position, right? So I get told off a lot, but if someone asks me, "Oh, can you do?" I'm going to say yes, right? It's just, I think we should and we can. And I was approached by a young man who's he had left care, and he was an ambassador for the care system, had a care experience himself, and said, "Look, could you meet?" We were on a Teams call, and there was about 200 people, and he emailed after saying, "Can we meet?" And I said, "Yes, let's meet." And that led to then, again, slightly building trust, meeting, having a coffee, understanding what he needed as a young person. He needed to be able to have a network. He didn't have a network. He needed to understand how to bounce from a business perspective. And there was one moment around his needing support out of hours. So on a Sunday, but, you know, the text came in and we had a call, and he took a job the next day. That kind of, yes. Now he said, "Well, could you meet my brother?" My brother was in more trouble than I was, and he was, you know, probably, you know, selling drugs, County Lyons. His story, these guys will speak openly about their story now. When I met him, that didn't go great the first meeting, because he wasn't in a good place, and that took another time in terms of building trust. So those sort of stories, if you then speak to Reese and Leo, the two brothers, who tell the story much better than I can. And it's nothing to do with me. It's to do with people in our sector building trusted relationships with people that need it. And by saying yes, listen, worst thing is never say yes if you can't do it. You know, if you say yes, I'm going to meet, you're meeting them. Yes, you can come and volunteer with us. You're going to do it. Yes, you can go on a training course. Yes, we can get you support. You know, these are simple things that we can do, which is where you then talk to these corporates and the big, you know, people that employ 30,000 people, and you say, imagine you all said yes on a social perspective. You would change the world. You would drastically change some of the problems we're facing, because there are hundreds of thousands of top class business leaders that just don't know how to get to the young people.
No.
So that's part of the job now, is to make sure we can get all of the young people exposure into these amazing folk in businesses and corporations and, you know, wherever. But for me, those three stories stand out because they personally mean something to me, right? So I've got kind of skin in the game there. I'm able to tell it, but there's hundreds of those stories.
Yeah, I'm listening to you here, Joe. And you know, you said earlier that you know, people don't tend to leave, and lots of chief execs, lots of people in your positions have been there for a very long time, and you can see why. It's just hugely powerful, impactful, inspirational, and for football to be able to be doing this, I just want the world to know about it. Really,
and listen, you should be really proud of what you're doing. It's fantastic for us. It's fantastic for us.
I hope so. I really want to. I'm just so motivated to shine as much of a light on this as possible. So yeah, no, thank you, and yeah, look, I really appreciate you joining the Power of Sport.
It's been a pleasure.
No, fantastic. Thank you, Joe.